Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, a 360-degree view of federal network security, sponsored by Brocade on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. Our guests today are Frank Konieczny, the Chief Technology Officer at the Air Force, Christine Calvosa, the Deputy CIO for Resiliency at the Federal Communications Commission, Jennifer Kron, the Deputy CIO of the Intelligence Community, Anthony Robbins, Vice President of Federal for Brocade, and Judson Walker, the Director of Systems Engineering for Brocade. I want to go back to something that Christine said at the very end of that first section about collaboration. And she didn't just say, we got to collaborate. She actually, I thought you did a really nice job of saying it's us and it's our industry partners and probably now shared services, as Jennifer knows quite well. So let me turn to Anthony first and start with you about the collaborative piece. How are you, for instance, how's Brocade or any vendor ensuring that you're doing this balance of network modernization and cybersecurity?
Collaboration is a really important part of network modernization, and there's a couple of aspects of it. First of all, we've got to get to a set of standards for agencies, whether you're in the civilian agency, Department of Defense, or intelligence community, a set of standards that relate to way more than just data centers and software. It relates to the network. As it relates to the set of standards, that will help us modernize the network infrastructure, and whether we want to just modernize networks or we want to get to the cloud, it's important. As we adopt these set of standards, we can choose cloud providers, and we can importantly move from one cloud provider to another. It'll also drive security, and it'll drive down costs. So the collaboration as it relates to open standards gets at so many things. Interagency collaboration, reduce cost, and improve security.
Jennifer, the collaborative piece, again, from your perspective, is even deeper because you have these 17 agencies that you guys are trying to balance and meet their needs. Talk a little about the collaboration from that perspective, but then how that also, if you will, moves out into industry and your industry partners.
Okay, thank you. Yes, as you noted, we've got 17 different entities in the intelligence community, and we believe in terms of improving our capabilities in terms of mission, the single greatest thing we can do is improve integration and our ability to operate as one community instead of 17 distinct entities. And what the Director of National Intelligence and the Principal Director realized a few years ago is that one of the greatest impediments is the fact that our IT systems were so stovepiped, and folks, even if they wanted to talk to each other, there were these obstacles in place. And so it was decided that by the Director of National Intelligence, for whom eyesight is one of his top priorities, that one of the greatest things we could do to improve our mission capability and our integration was to move forward as a community as we pursued IT modernization. And what we found, as I mentioned earlier, is that by doing that, we simultaneously can improve our security and drive down and increase our efficiency as well. So in terms of the collaboration, by having cloud-based services, for example, that are provided by the agencies who are best equipped to do that in partnership where appropriate with the appropriate commercial side, that's bringing state-of-the-art from the industry side as well as the specific requirements that we have in the intelligence community together, so that each service that is provided as part of the overall IT enterprise is the best of breed made available to the entirety of the intelligence community. Some of the watchwords that we use as part of eyesight are that we should view data as an IC asset. So data doesn't belong to the individual who collected it or that office or that agency, but everyone in the intelligence community who has a need to see it. We also say we should do in common what is commonly done. So if we're all have similar requirements in terms of our network security, we should get together and use the best of breed and apply that across. So some of the specific ways that we're ensuring network security in this new approach is through enterprise identity access and audit services, enterprise data object management and data object tagging, and then developing and implementing, as Anthony was referring to earlier, enterprise audit standards.
Judson, let me turn to you, because a lot of times when you talk about collaboration, it's easy. We can sit around this table and talk, we should collaborate, that's great. But when it gets to the nitty-gritty, when you look at the engineering side of it, where does difficulties pop in that collaboration? Because is it you think of a boat, and I think, well, my boat has a sail, and you think of a boat, and it has a motor, and all of a sudden we think we're in the same thing, but we're really not.
Yeah, Jason, that's a good point. I think it starts with providing standards-based solutions across the board from a modernization standpoint. Because one of the things that we have found and what we want to deliver as far as industry delivering solutions to the U.S. government is most of the models are very statically oriented right now, which are very reactive, disjointed, and very manual in making moves, adds, and changes. But as we look at the migration to the cloud, and we look at the evolution of the IoT, and so many attack vectors popping up so quickly, we really need to start delivering solutions that are more dynamic in nature, that have a level of intelligence, that are proactive versus reactive, and also have a level of service delivery, so we can make very quick adjustments based on various mission threats.
Frank, Judson said something that was very interesting, dynamic migration to the cloud, and that brought up this idea of network as a service, something the Air Force is looking at. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, we realized that we had a problem updating and maintaining all of our networks on the bases. I mean, we get various vendors in, we get various ways of doing maintenance agreements and everything else. And so we've come out with, and actually we're running out of people, which is interesting. We're running out of airmen to actually do their job. So we came up with a concept of saying that we wanted to actually have network as a service for the entire base. We give the entire network maintenance over to some vendor that actually run all of our networks there, modernize them as required, make sure we have resiliency, and keep up with the maintenance and everything else on that network. This is very interesting because that leaves our airmen to now do what they're supposed to be doing. And sometimes, so cybersecurity is one of those things they're supposed to be doing, as opposed to maintaining a network. This is an interesting concept, and we're trying to push it out throughout, so they will not only do network, but maybe desktop management, as well as the data center by itself will run the data center in the same way. So as we get to more things as a service, we're trying to push it in such a way that we are saving money. It's efficiency for us, because we don't have to outlay of money initially. The maintenance is included in the bill, and we assume that the vendor is going to provide some modernization to actually decrease their cost in the network.
So, Christine, what Frank described is the old model, almost like seat management, outsourcing. I know that maybe those are dirty words now, and with cloud it's a little different. At MCI doesn't live. But this is something you guys kind of did too, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is a great topic and great segue. We have been really, over the last even year and a half that I've been at the FCC, moving towards three main phases, right? We did stabilization last year in 2015, and a little bit of rationalization of not only just our applications, but just our entire infrastructure, and then moving really to modernization. And we're doing modernizing at every level, from even the network, as Frank talked about, to our applications. And it's great to hear that we're not the only folks moving in that type of manner, where we're really putting onus on the cloud providers and service providers to give us the best of breed and to continue to provide it for us. And so I think even hearing Judson talk a little bit about being more proactive, I think is great, because I think we're heavily depending on really industry and service providers to get us to a point where we don't constantly have to be reactive, but more proactive. So I think this is great, and we're looking forward to this.
Anthony, is this the future? Is all the onus on you?
No, it's not.
Judson,
no,
it's
not. That's a good point. I think we've talked about, as we talked about collaboration, and we've talked about open standards, we've talked about resource constraints and budget constraints. It's really important that industry collaborates together to bring solutions that address the challenges that the federal government has. It is not about selling stuff. It's about serving this marketplace at a time of critical need, right? So the cybersecurity threat is incredible. The age of the network and the infrastructure, Tony Scott talks about this being a much bigger issue than the Y2K issue. Terry Halverson talks about networking as an important priority. So the network of the future, for which industry will collaborate with federal government, will be multi-vendor based, open standards based. It'll be simplified, software-enabled, and delivered as a service. And those things are exactly what this panel has been talking about today.
Jennifer, let me turn to you. The future, when you look out a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what's the intelligence community, what's ISIC going to, whatever we're going to call it by then, what's it going to look like?
So first I would say I feel like the term eyesight is probably nearing the end of its useful life.
I loved it.
Because the whole idea of it is that's sort of the name that we are giving to the process of transformation, that before we had this stovepipe segmented approach, and now we're moving towards just a smarter way of doing our IT modernization together. So that really doesn't need a special name. That's just a smart way of moving forward with our IT modernization. What's interesting when I look towards the future and how we're going to ensure network and cybersecurity in within the intelligence community, the greatest challenges are not actually about the IT of it. The future of information safeguarding, as we've talked about, for the intelligence community especially, lies in an integrated approach across all of the different intelligence components. So that's about doing in common what is commonly done and viewing data as a community asset. The biggest obstacles that we're seeing in making these principles real are not technological. We know how to make these things happen from an IT perspective. The challenges that we see are more about policies and processes and acquisition, and above all, culture. So breaking down barriers between agencies, and most importantly, building this consensus that the most secure IT environment is an integrated one. Those are the keys to ensuring our IC network is secure in the future.
I saw a lot of heads nodding. I think a lot of people at this table would agree. Unfortunately, though, we are out of time. I know this conversation will continue in part 2, but this group, I know we could talk longer. You've been listening to the panel discussion, a 360-degree view of federal network security, sponsored by Brocade on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. Our guests today on panel 1 were Frank Konieczny, the Chief Technology Officer at the Air Force, Christine Calvosa, the Deputy CIO for Resiliency at the Federal Communications Commission, Jennifer Kron, the Deputy CIO for the Intelligence Community, Anthony Robbins, Vice President Federal for Brocade, and Judson Walker, the Director of Systems Engineering for Brocade. Thanks for joining us today. Stick around for part 2 of our discussion. But if you missed any of this, you can visit federalnewsradio.com, search The New IP.